Step 4 says to fold your pocket in half to find the middle. You're going to put up a mark halfway and the halfway point on the bottom of the right side of the fabric. And in this case, we're going to make a couple different marks down that middle so that we can tell where we're going to be sewing. This dot and these several dots will create a left and a right side of your pocket. We are using an erasable marker so that over time the air will just make it disappear. It's a special marker. Don't use any marker that you want. See the dots down the line. Step 5 says, depending on your print, decide which side is the top. Now this print can go, it's not directional, so it can go any way. So we're just going to decide on one of the sides being the top. And from that top, we're going to flip our fabric over to the wrong side, which is the dull side of the fabric. And using our seam gauge, we're going to measure 1 inch down from the top and draw several dots down that. So we're actually going to go from this side. Oh. Yep. And with our erasable marker, draw a couple of dots down that top edge. So this is step 5. I like drawing several dots rather than like a whole line because then I save some fabric marker, like I don't waste all of my marker. And then I don't have to use a straight edge to draw a line. It just goes a lot faster. All right, we'll move on to step 6. Step 6 says to fold the top of your fabric a 1/2 inch to the dots that you made. So notice that we made an inch mark, but we're only going to be folding it to that inch mark, so our fold should actually be a 1/2 inch. And what Bobby Joe is going to do is she's going to finger press, which is a lot like pressing your paper to fold a crease in there. It'll just help your fabric stay in place a little bit more. And now we're going to grab some pins and we're going to pin our fabric so that it stays tight and down. In order to pin, you're going to stick the pin through the fabric, through all layers, and then bring it back through all layers. It won't work if you pin it just straight down and it only goes through the fabric once. It's got to go in the fabric and then back out the fabric. And pin it at least 3 times, if not more, so that the fabric stays and does what you want it to do. All right, with step 7, it says line the left side of your presser foot up to the 1 inch line, and that 1 inch line should be just the edge of the fabric or where it's where the fabric stops. And we're starting about a 1/2 inch in, so we're not starting on the exact edge of our fabric. It just makes it a lot easier to sew. We're going to stitch all the way across, but making sure to backstitch before we start. Backstitching is a way of tying off, so instead of just tying a knot at the end, backstitching just secures our fabric in, or a thread in our fabric. And we're going to stitch all the way down. What I want you to notice is that when we're stitching, we're keeping the left side of the presser foot lined up with the fabric at all times. And this is going to help us make a really nice straight line all the way through. As you go, make sure that you take out the pins before they reach the foot. If you sew over a pin, you could wreck the machine. A pin could break up and like hit you. It's happened before. It's not very fun. And it's important when you sew to go at your own pace. Some people like to stitch fast where others like to go slow. I say you need to go at your own pace until you figure out what works best for you. It's always better to be on the slower side in case you make a mistake. At any point, if you don't like the stitch that you're making and you feel like it's going off, it's important to just slowly direct the fabric where you'd like it to go. rather than stopping the machine and then moving the fabric abruptly. So you want to make it really nice and subtle. Just like driving a car, it's never good to make the car jump. You want to just slowly drive it back into the lanes. And now we're going to make sure we backstitch. To take out your fabric, you can just slide it out just gently. You can take scissors and trim it off. Or there is a knife right here, and you can slide the threads over it and cut it. Great. Step 8 says to line the edges of your bag and pocket up. You're going to pin the pocket to the front side of one of your bag rectangles at the bottom. And you need to make sure that your pocket is not upside down. You can tell that your pocket is correct because the fold that you just sewed should be on the top of your pocket, or of your bag, excuse me. You should use about 6 pins to hold your fabric down. We're going to pin perpendicularly to our fabric edge. This makes it so it's easier to pull out our pins as we're sewing. Make sure they're nice and straight in there. And remember that we're placing the pin in the fabric and then back out of the fabric. Recognize that you should be looking at both of the right sides of your pocket and your bag right now. Step 9 says line the right side of your presser foot up with the upper right corner of your pocket. And that's what we're doing right here. Now we're going to baste our pocket onto our bag. And a baste is just a really long stitch. It's temporary and it's just meant to hold 2 things together. So to baste on this machine, you're going to use this button and mark it all the way up to 6. This is our stitch length. So now when we stitch, our stitches will be really long. It'll actually be a lot easier to sew and a lot faster because the machine is going to be pulling a lot more fabric with each stitch. And the point of basting, like I said, is just temporary. It's just holding our pocket on until we can actually sew the rest of our bag down. We're going to start on the right side of our project, which we're doing right now, and we're going to go all the way around, making sure to pivot at the corners. Now remember, to pivot, what we do is get to the corner. We're going to drop our needle down into the fabric. We'll pick up our foot and twist the fabric so that it lines up with our foot again, and then drop our foot down and then keep sewing. So I want to show you the baste while we're still sewing. The baste is a lot larger than our normal stitches. Let's see if I can find it. There's our big baste stitches. And if you look, right up here is our normal stitches. So seeing them side to side, you can see a huge big difference. If you make a mistake with the baste, it's very easy to take out with the seam ripper. And with the baste, because it's only temporary, we don't have to backstitch at the beginning or the end. Here we come to the corner again. We'll drop our needle down, pick up our foot, turn the fabric, put the foot back down, and keep sewing. And you'll do this till you get to the end of your bag.
The edge of the pocket.
Yep. Step 10 says sew down the middle of your pocket. These are for the dots that we made earlier that go right down the middle of the pocket. This will create our right and left pocket. You can do a regular straight stitch as long as it's back down to 0, 0. Or you can do a fun fancy stitch, which I highly recommend. I like stitch number 7, and so to do that, we'll actually use the right arrow, or the right one, and click all the way up to 7. it's going to look like kind of a chain that we use. We still need to backstitch at the beginning and the end, and I want you to notice that we're starting at the bottom of our pocket, not at the top of the pocket. And the reason we're doing that is so that if it bunches, it'll bunch and kind of spread itself out evenly throughout the rest of the pocket. But if you start at the top, it'll bunch and make a mess at the bottom of your pocket. So we're using stitch 7. We're making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. And with stitch 7, if you choose to use it, you just want to make sure you've practiced on another piece of fabric so you understand how the machine is going to work. You'll notice that it's not going straight up and down now. It's going side to side because it's making a really pretty pattern in the back. Just make sure to check to see if you like it. You can always start over. And just be patient as the machine is taking a lot longer on this stitch. Once again, please don't forget to backstitch at the end of this one because this is going to have a lot of stress on it. So a backstitch is really important so it doesn't fall apart. Notice we're not speeding. We're going quickly but not going too fast. If you go too fast, this stitch might not turn out the way you want it to. We're going to go all the way to the edge of the pocket and maybe a stitch or two beyond the pocket just to make sure it's secured. And a couple back stitches here and there would be very, very helpful. Step 11 and 12 are kind of long, tedious steps, but I want to show you why we do them. This is a step that's going to make it so that the casing at the top of our bag where our cording goes through doesn't do this. This is called fraying, and it will deteriorate your bag over time. So we're going to be folding over and sewing fabric on the long sides of our bags so that we can avoid doing this. So I'm going to show you how to do that. So step 11 says at the wrong side of your bag, this is the long side as well, the wrong side of your bag, I want you to measure an inch over and make a line or several dots like we're doing here on the side of your bag. So we're measuring an inch over and then drawing these dots. Again, this is to finish our edges. We're going to repeat this step on all 4 long sides of our bags. Notice we've skipped the top, that's the shorter side. We don't need to do it on the top or the bottom of our bag. That will be taken care of later. So we're going to do that to our other side as well. I just want to show you once again that we're doing this to the long sides, not the short sides of our bags. And we've also done it on the wrong side, which is the dull side of our fabric. All right, step 12 says fold the side of the front of your bag to the 1-inch line. So in the end, you'll have a 1/2 inch fold. You're going to pin that up. It's going to be kind of hard to pin so that you're perpendicular with the edge, so however you can pin it is fine. Once again, remembering that our pins are anchored in. We've got one pin going in and going out, and this is what it should look like on the other side. It's going to be a little difficult in the area where you have your pocket, so just be patient. More pins might be necessary on that area just to hold it down into place. The second part of this step says to sew the lines or sew the sides of your fabric, making sure that the left side of your presser foot lines up with the side edge of your folded fabric. So the left side of your presser foot lines up with the edge of your fabric.
The cut edge. The
cut edge, exactly. Once again, we're not going on the exact middle down the line. We're not starting on the edge of our fabric. We're kind of starting with a 1/2 inch so that our fabric doesn't get sucked into the machine. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. As you come to a pin, just pull the pin out before you get to it so you don't break the machine or you break the pin. To ensure that you're making a straight line, keep the edge of your fabric lined up with the right side or the left side of your presser foot, excuse me. if you're just eyeballing it and you're just kind of saying whatever, it'll just go down the middle, it's not going to look as good. You also might mess up with the fold of your fabric and you might get a different size and then your bag won't be quite as accurate. So right now we're getting really close to where our pocket starts. So if you're getting nervous about that, just go slow. And what I do is I go even slower as I get up to it. I might even pick up my foot ever so slightly. I don't push my fabric through it, otherwise you can make a hole. I might even kind of poke down my fabric so that it goes, and I might even tug just slightly on the back of my fabric to kind of get it going. And once you get over that hump, it should be really easy to sew after that. You're just sewing through multiple layers, and it takes the machine just a second to kind of recognize that. You'll notice after you get to your pocket that you have your baseline there. You're going to be practically stitching right over your baseline, so that's kind of nice. Kind of gives you another line to look at while you're sewing. Another thing to look at is every time that we have sewed, we've had our bag kind of hanging over the left side of our project. Now it looks right to us because of the way that we're focused, but to our sewer, it's hanging over the left side. This means it's not running into the machine, it's hanging over the left, making it really easy and it's not clumping up. Make sure to backstitch at the end. Step 13 says at the top of the wrong or dull side of your bag, the big rectangle pieces, you're going to measure 3 inches down with your seam gauge and make a line or several dots like we're doing here across the top of your bag. And this is going to be for your casing, which is where your cording will go through. We're going to do this at the top of both of our rectangle pieces. Now make sure obviously that if you're working with the side that has the pocket, that the pocket is the bottom and that you're going to be making the casing on the top. So once again, measure 3 inches down. You can either make a line or several dots like we're doing here. And that's step 13. Let's go ahead and work on step 14. Step 14 is to now fold your casing to the 3-inch line. So you're going to use the dots that you made or the line that you made, and that's where we're going to fold to. You're going to pin right there. Try to pin that line so that it's easy for you to sew. You can already see that you have a really nice finished edge right at the edge of your casing, and it's not like the example I showed you earlier that was fraying. Yours is nice and clean. You're going to do this to both of the bags. Step 15 says to sew your casing, making sure to line the left side of your presser foot up with the bottom edge or the cut edge of your folded fabric. You'll need to have room to be able to slide your cording through, and that's going to go right there. Make sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. You're going to do this to both sides of your bag, both the front of your bag and the back of your bag. Once again, I want to remind you that you don't have to just sew by eye. You don't just randomly put your needle anywhere. We're lining up the cut edge of our fabric with that edge of our foot, and that's how we make sure that we have a really nice straight line. Also, if you find yourself, again, not going straight, not going even, make sure that you just slowly guide your fabric back to where you want it to go, and it's okay if it takes a little while to get there. What we don't want is a huge big jump, because the big jumps look really, really bad. And also they provide like a point that could be very weak or could be broken, and that could mess with the rest of your fabric as well. So just slowly guide your fabric back. What you notice about us sewing right now is that we're taking our time and noticing if there's anything wrong or if there's something we need to fix. When I sew, I like to take a look behind me to make sure that my previous stitches look good. Sometimes your bobbin will run out while you're sewing, and that's a very sad day. But that if you're paying attention to what's going on behind you, you can notice if you've stopped sewing, if your bobbin's run out, and you can fix it. And as always, don't forget to backstitch at the beginning and the end. If you've backstitched everything, when it comes to these little threads right here, you'll be able to just clip them when you're done, and no harm will come to them. And that's because they've been backstitched so nicely that will stay and when the threads come off. Step 16 says pin the side of the bag right sides together. Your pocket should be on the inside, and put a pin every 3 to 4 inches apart, which is about the width of your hand. Make sure not to pin the top or the bottom of your bag, and place a pin at your casing so that you know not to sew above it. If you sew above your casing, then you're not going to have a spot for your cording to go through. Now we have these awesome little clips that you can use instead of pins. They're like clothespins. You'll notice that some of them have a flat side, which that flat side can just easily slide on the table. And if you prefer to use these, you absolutely can. I find them way easier than pins. But sometimes we don't have enough clips for everyone in the class, so there might not be enough and you might need to use pins sometime. But you can see how fast it goes when we're clipping them. Once again, I want to remind you not to clip or pin your casings because these need to be open so that you can put your cording through. You're also not going to be sewing the top of your bag, and I'm sure you can tell me why you don't want to sew that. Right now, you don't want to sew the bottom of your bag because that will be the last step that you do. You'll be putting your cording through that. Now you're ready for step 17. Now we're going to take it to the sewing machine. We're going to sew down both sides below our casing, making sure to backstitch at the beginning and the end. Do not sew the bottom or the top of your bag. You want to be able to have your cording come out through the bottom of your bag. Now to sew this one, I like to put my right side of my presser foot up with the side of my fabric. Now notice obviously to us it's the left side because we're facing the opposite direction. It's super important at this point that we backstitch at the beginning and the end. If you'd like to, you can backstitch a couple different times just to make sure to secure your bag. But once or twice should be enough. You'll also notice that you will have already some stitching there. You can use that as a guide, or you can, again, use the side of your presser foot. Once again, I want to remind you to use the left side of your sewing machine that doesn't have the actual machine on it to put the bulk of your fabric so that it doesn't get all bunched up, make it harder to sew. Now this stitch is going to be a little tricky, and that's because you're sewing through several different layers. If you hear a noise just like we heard, you might want to stop and problem solve. I can see here that our thread has broken for some reason. So we're going to stop, we're going to take a breath, and we're going to rethread the top and the bottom of our machine. If this happens to you, don't fret, no worries. We're going to just check out and see what our fabric looks like. It looks like we're starting to form a little octopus, so that's good. We want to make sure that we don't make it any worse than we have it. So go ahead and rethread the top and the bottom of your machine. And when you go to restart, find the last stitch that you made, and that's where you're going to be starting again. So start again on the last stitch that you made, backstitch just a little bit just to make sure it's anchored in there, and then continue sewing like normal. If you have a really bad problem that something's really ugly on either side of your bag, that's when we want to stop and we want to restitch it. We'll first have to seam rip, but not for right now. So we're going to problem solve, and we'll finish sewing up the rest of the sides, and we'll see you at the next step. Step 18 says cut your 4 yards of cording in half and put a knot in each end if it unravels. But in this case, we've already actually cut yours in half, and you have 2 yards each. And this is the kind of cording that can be melted on the end, so it shouldn't unravel. If it does, let me know and I'll help you with it. Going on to step 19, it says attach a safety pin to one cord to help it guide through the casing. What you're going to do is you're going to pull your safety pin through and then grab it with your other hand. So I call it like the push, push, pull. Push, push, pull. And that's going to be guiding your cording through your casing. You're going to pull it through both sides of the casing so that you have a loop on one end and 2 tails on the other. So it's going to look like this. So we pulled it on one end. Yay! And now we're going to take our safety pin and put it through the other end and do the exact same thing. This is going to lead us with one loop on the end, on this end, 2 tails on this end. Once again, we're going to do something that I call a push, push, pull. So you're going to push it on one end and then kind of pull it on the other. Step 20 says repeat step 19, but now we're going to start on opposite sides of the casing so that you have a loop and tails on both sides of your bag. What we're doing right now in this part is we're just evening out our tails so that they're the same length. This takes a little bit of maneuvering and you can get there. So we'll take the safety pin off this cord and put it on our other. You can borrow a safety pin from me, but these are my favorite thing I own. They're my own personal safety pins in the classroom, so make sure that you give them back to me. We're going to take our tail and take it through the side that already has a loop in there. This part will be a little bit harder because you already have one cording in there, so just be patient and pull it through. At the end of this, you will know you'll be successful if you take both tails that you have, and if you pull on them, if the bag cinches, you've done it perfectly. If it doesn't cinch, oh, I'm sorry, you'll have to try again. So pull it out of this loop, or this first part of the casing. And again, it's just going to take a little bit of maneuvering, so be patient. And then put it back through the other side of the casing. Now you've got a lot of cords going on there, so just be patient. All right, we'll see you at step 21. You'll know you've done steps 19 and 20 correctly when you pull on your strings and the bag will cinch. That's good. If you don't pull, or if it doesn't cinch when you pull, you've not done it correctly. Moving on to step 21, what you're going to do is you're going to tuck your tails into the of your cording on the inside of your bag and pin them in the bottom corner with the bag still inside out. Make sure your cords are tucked into your pocket, and your cords should come out of the bottom of your bag. Now we want to make sure that our cords come out evenly so that we have a nice even cording at the top, and just a little bit. You don't need to have more than ½ an inch or so. Now here's an example of how to pin them with the clips, and to pin them with normal pins, you would just stick the pin in and make sure it comes back out. Now we're going to go to step 22. We're going to be sewing along the bottom of our bag, and to do that we're going to be putting the right side of our presser foot, matching that up to the edge of our fabric. Again, the left of the machine, we're going to have our bulk of our fabric. Now this might be a little awkward, especially if you're using clips instead of pins, just to get all of that junk into the machine and under the presser foot. So just be patient as you're putting it in. You're going to be sewing along the bottom of the bag again. Make sure to reverse stitch at least 5 times over your cords. And the reason we're doing that is just to reinforce the cords. If you don't reverse stitch, it could be easy for you to accidentally pull the cording out. So you're going to reverse stitch 5 times over the cording at the front, and then sew down the rest of the bag, reverse stitching at the cords at the end as well. And if you'd like to, you can actually sew a couple times down the edge of your bag, just to make sure that it's actually secure. We're just going nice and slow, reverse stitching 5 times. Sometimes the machine doesn't like this. It might feel too bulky for it. So if that's the case, just take it out, seam rip, and start over. So I'm going to show you the reverse stitching. You can see that there's lots and lots of stitches going on right there. And that is what it should look like. So now we're going to sew down the rest of our bag, going all the way down to the other set of cords. So here we go to the last set of cords. Getting ready. Here we go. Here's our first back stitching. Right. When you're done with that, you can just take the bag out. While it's inside out, you can take your pair of scissors and trim off any loose threads that you might have. Take a double check and make sure everything looks good, that you have no holes in the side of your bag. I will be grading on that. The last thing that you'll do after you trim all of your little threads is that you're going to turn your bag inside or right side in. Take a look at it, feel really proud because you did something awesome today. The last step I have is step 23, where you're going to fill out your evaluation. You are graded on your on your own evaluation, and so make sure you write a nice reflection showing me what you've learned about how to sew and about yourself. What I'd like you to do is put your name on that evaluation or your reflection, put it inside the bag and turn the bag in. As you can see, when we turn it out, our cords are secured on the inside of our bag. It looks really nice. We're poking out the edges right now. You can do so by pulling on the cords themselves, just like that. It's great. And there you have your bag. Hopefully you feel really good about life now, and you can use your bag wherever you go. Good job.